So, not long ago, I did a video on what every daughter needs to hear from their father. I thought it would be good to do a follow-up one here for the boys. Although, to be honest, this one's probably going to be a little bit more flippant and a little bit more funnier because, you know, it's boys, and if they don't like it, they should just deal with it. I also had a woman ask me why I couldn't have done just one on what every child needs to hear. Why did I separate it into daughters and sons? And the answer is because they're different. Of course, there are some things that all children need to hear, and if you would like to do that video, by all means, be my guest. Maybe I'll even watch it. Probably not from her, but I might watch one like that. But I happen to believe that sons and daughters actually need different things at various points in their life. These are things that every son needs to hear. First thing, don't be a wuss. Look, facts of life are this. The world demands a lot from men, and raising a wuss is not going to prepare them for it. It doesn't do much good for the world either. I mean, let's be honest, guys. What do you think of weak, effeminate men who can't do anything? Do you want your son to turn out that way? Okay. Then next time he hurts himself or complains that something is too hard, just remind him that nobody cares and to get up and get the job done. All right, so that's number one. What's number two? Number two is, seriously, don't be a wuss. Now, why twice and even back to back? Because it's that important. That's why. Men have to do difficult things like build buildings, roads, put out fires, fight wars, fly jets, etc. And those things are not typically accomplished by guys who stop working, fighting, or striving the moment it gets difficult. So when I say things like, don't be a wuss to my son, it's not because I'm being a jerk. It's because I'm trying to prepare him for something. Because regardless of whether you think it's right or just or whatever else, facts are facts. And while, yeah, there's a lot of things that women might be able to get away with, men can't. You don't get to cry in order to stop. You don't get to call time out. You've got to get up there and you've got to get the job done no matter what. And I want my son to be prepared for that. I want him to be proud of his ability to be prepared for that. And so, yeah, am I difficult on my son? And have I been difficult on my son for quite some times when it comes to sucking it up and carrying it on? Yeah, I have been. And I don't apologize for it. And I think if you actually saw my son and I interact, you would realize that he's appreciated it as well. So that's the first two things. Amazingly similar, but equally important. All right, so what's the third thing that your son needs to hear from his father? Well, when things start to get difficult, or when he's trying to fight through something and he starts to talk about something being sore or heavy, I like to look at him and say, have you tried putting a little MAN on it? Yeah, that's right. Be a man, right? This is for when your son is considering being a little wuss, but hasn't committed yet, right? Again, usually happens when he's complaining about something being heavy or sore or, I don't know, that hurt. So that's the part where you subtly remind your child that, well, Johnny cracked corn, and guess what? I don't care. It's an important way to let your son know that he is welcome to complain about it after the job is done and everyone is out of earshot, but until then, get back to work. All right, so what's the fourth thing that sons need to hear from their fathers? Well, this next one is, would you like to come along? See, boys need time with their father, dedicated time, away from their mother and their sisters. It doesn't have to be much, but they need to know that they are welcome to come along to things. Oftentimes to things that you might not imagine they're even interested in. What might seem to you like a job or errand might just make their whole day because they got to help dad with the big boy stuff. Now, obviously, everything I've talked about so far is age appropriate on some level, but try it out sometimes. No matter what age your son is, if he's little, if he's teenage years, whatever it is, when you're going to Lowe's or when you're going to work on something or pick something up, let him know and say, hey, you want to come along? Now, I'm going to be honest with you, it helps if you start doing this when they're little, because the same is true of daughters as it is of sons. If when they were little, you didn't take much of an interest in what they were interested in, and you didn't include them in much, well, then when they get older, they're not going to include you in much. But if you start off when they're young, devoting that time and including them on things, again, things that you might not even think that they would be interested in, you will be absolutely shocked at how it makes their whole day. Next thing you might consider is telling your son, can you help me with this? Asking your son to help you is not only time you get to spend together or education that is taking place, but again, it's letting him know that you trust his strength, competency, and responsibility. One of the things that young men need is challenges. And one of the ways that you prepare them for those challenges is when they're little, you let them work with you. And yeah, don't get me wrong, if you're working on something really important, give them something else to work on that they think is a part of the project, but is not going to cause any excess damage or require 3 more Lowe's trips than you already have put into the project. But make sure that they get to swing a hammer, make sure that they get to mow lawns and do other things that will give them a sense of responsibility, but also accomplishment. And then don't spare them criticism when they need to do it right. But when they do it right, when they get it right, that's when you look at them and you let them know that you're proud of them. It's important for boys to have those challenges and to overcome those challenges and to know that their father's proud of them when they do. Because like with anything else in life, you get more of what you reward and less of what you punish. So don't punish your kid for wanting to get in there and do things, and reward them when they do it right. All right, so what's another thing that your son needs to hear from you? I used to like to tell my son, even when he was a little bit smaller, take care of your mother and sisters while I'm gone. Now, interestingly enough, some people in Hollywood and pop culture don't think this is appropriate. I think it was Alyssa Milano that got really bent out of shape and said we need to stop telling boys to take care of their mom when dad's away as if she can't take care of herself. Yeah, don't listen to her. She's a moron. Because men protect. At least the good ones do. And while it is your job to teach your son how to protect, the first people he will practice on are his mother and sisters. And when you tell your son to protect his mother and sisters, you are calling out the protector in him and you're adding responsibility to it. You're creating in him the expectation that this is the role a man plays and he needs to start accepting it as such. And you'll be surprised at how much they embrace it. This is also something that your wife can do, that his mother can do in order to help it as well. Once a boy starts to reach to a certain age where he can understand this concept, you start to give him more tasks. It can be everything from lifting something heavy to helping mom open a jar, to where when you're not home, him being the one that looks outside the window when something goes bump in the night. But whatever it is, call out the protector in your son. Again, you'll be surprised at how eagerly he embraces it. So another thing you need to tell your boy is, I'm proud of you. I remember when my son was pretty young. There was an incident at a sleepover where some kids killed an animal for no reason other than to kill it. And he didn't approve and he refused to join in, and he was made fun of it pretty bad for it. But he stood his ground and told them that they shouldn't be doing what they were doing. And it really bothered him, not just for what happened, because at that point he was the smallest in his friend group and didn't have the ability to force them to do anything. But nevertheless, he refused to be intimidated into joining in. But because of what happened and his inability to do anything about it, I think he was a little bit ashamed. And I remember speaking to him the next day and telling him that I was very proud of him for standing up in a situation where it would have been very easy to turn a blind eye or to give in. The toughest time to stand strong is when you're outnumbered or when you can't do much about it, but you do it anyway. That's honorable, and a man should be honorable. And I remember telling him that in that moment, at a very young moment in his life, where anybody else would have excused him for not doing the right thing, he stood up. It's a good habit to set, because inevitably as a man, there's going to be times where you have to be honorable and you have to be brave in situations where it could go very badly for you. And you set the patterns for how someone will behave in that situation when they're young. In demonstrating strong character at that formative point in his life was something that I wanted to earmark by making sure that I had his attention, looking him in the eye and telling him, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for doing the right thing. Make sure you do that. Only do it when it's warranted. Otherwise, you cheapen it. But there'll be times, and when it happens, make sure he knows. Because believe me, he'll remember it. All right, so what is the last thing I have for you today on stuff that every son should hear? Well, the last one is, I love you. I know, gay, right? I'm just kidding. No, maybe a little. I make sure that I tell my son I love him because it's the truth, and he deserves to hear it every bit as much as his sisters do. But one of the ways that you're going to show love to your son is by also giving him respect. Men and women both want love and they both want respect, but I stand by the fact that I believe they interpret it and put different value on it. Men have a very hard time feeling love if it isn't accompanied by respect. Love without respect feels a lot like pity to a man. Love can be freely given, but respect has to be earned, and that is one of the reasons men desire it so badly. Also, respect helps a man find his place in a group because you are respected for something: fighting, sports, intelligence, whatever it may be. Men seek to find their place in society, and the areas where they receive respect are the areas they tend towards. So keep that in mind when dealing with this with your son. You're going to need to tell him that you love him, but you're also going to need to tell him and show him that you respect him. And just like what I said before, you can't manufacture it. You can't do it when it's not earned. I remember very vividly when my son was playing football, and everyone in the Pee Wee League got a participation trophy. And he comes out, and he shows it to me. And I said, "Are you proud of that?" And he goes, "No." And he throws it away. I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because I didn't want to just participate. I wanted to win." And then he showed up the next season, and they won. And he got a trophy that was worth winning. And I showed him that I respected him for that. Again, it's not being harsh. It's preparing your son for a world that is going to treat him very differently. And especially now, it's not just that the world doesn't need any more weak men, can't afford to have them. And so it will be difficult at times when you want to run and pick him up and hold him. And there'll be times for that as well. But you need to make sure that he can stand up on his own. And the more he realizes that you love him because he's your son, that you respect him because of the man he's become, that's going to be the sort of thing that carries him through in situations where he needs to be the sort of man that his wife will need, that his children will one day need, and that ultimately our culture desperately needs. So those are a couple things to keep in mind with respect to what your son needs from you as a father. Again, not a comprehensive list. I guarantee you, as I think about this more, I'm going to think of things I forgot or think of things that I should have said maybe a little bit differently. I'm sure there's people that cut off right away the moment I made a joke about telling your son not to be a wuss. Just keep in mind it was only half a joke. It is something that you should tell him. But I want to make it very clear. Just because I'm a little bit more tender and sensitive with my daughters doesn't mean I love my son any less. I have a different obligation with respect to what I'm preparing them all for. And I want my son to be prepared. And at 18 years old and about to leave home, I believe he is. And I'm very thankful for that because I was very proud of him as a boy. And now I'm very proud of him as a man. He'll always be my son. And now he's moving into a stage where he's also a friend and a colleague. And I don't think a father can ask for much more than that.